Minister to set up the case here.
Here.
Alright.
Everyone else turn mute. Everyone else mute. Unless you have a POI.
I'll start now. Will that be fine?
I'm ready.
Alright, okay. First thing first, Mr. Speaker, sir, I would want to reaffirm the motion. This House would pay additional benefits to families on welfare whose children perform well in school. Let me first, Let me first define the motion, as in like, what does it mean by additional benefits? In our world, or for the government side today that we are setting up the case, as in like, the additional benefits means we would eventually pay in the form of monetary. Monetary in the idea of, we would pick the top 3 students. We would not pick, but it depends on their ranking, on their performances in class, and it depends on how many A's they have that particular class have particular achieve, and from that we would choose like 3 top students, and depending on their A, we pay them like RM50 ringgit. And when I talk about children here, we mean those B40 children and not those M40 or T20 children, because those M40 and T20 students, why do they need additional welfares? Like they can really support by themselves. And also looking at this status quo today, we are having this kind of restriction is because of the kind of resource that we think that we could get. Because initially, every funding would eventually get from the Parents Teachers Association, and for that, the parents, those teachers need to like additionally work harder for them to get those funds. So we think by adding this restriction would eventually reduce their burden as well. So before I move on, I'm actually moving on to my first argument. So on the government side, I'll be talking about why is it important in terms of like children. Why is it important for them to actually get those benefits, and also in terms of like school, on how they can actually get those benefits, and that would eventually lead to a better and prosperous school culture by itself. And also my DPM will be talking about on the source of encouragement. It would particularly be an encouragement for the student to eventually work hard by itself. So first, now I'm going to move on to my first point, which is to reduce the family's burden of the children. As we all know, in this status quo, as in like it's in PKP and all those stuff, children go through online classes and stuff like that. So in terms of like internet, it's definitely not cheap. So that's why we think that by us paying them would eventually reduce the amount of burden by themselves. And when I say about those children, the kind of children that I meant is basically SPM students. Because why? Because of the restriction that we have in terms of like funding. So that's why we are having this kind of like restriction. And the reason why we are how would it eventually reduce the children of the burden of the children is whereby children would eventually get funded. They can actually use those money for those internet and stuff like that. And for students that don't prefer PDF notes, that literally don't really have the necessity, no, not necessity, the reliability to go through laptop and stuff like that, they can eventually print out those notes, and to print out those notes they eventually need money by themselves. And when we talk about SPM subjects, it's basically 9. Everyone has to go through those 9 subjects for them to get a pass or an 8 or to perform well by themselves. So that would eventually be like a funding for them in the first place, Mrs. Speaker, sir. And hold on,
I have a POI.
we are in the same team, right? I guess. Okay. When we talk about reducing the family's burden of the children itself, I would eventually want to focus on the idea of students getting food also by themselves. That it would eventually reduce the idea of children getting that is being burdened by their parents by itself. We understand here.
Dude, I'm a separate team. I'm opposition, so I want a POI.
Right. Hold on. Let me finish my point first. Okay. And then in that particular ideology, and good food is basically literally a bit more expensive compared to normal food. So that's why we think that by funding them would eventually be able them to eat healthy. At the end of the day, also perform for the good of the school by itself. Yes. Before I move on, yes, POI. Excuse me. Any POI?
Sorry. Okay, so
Alright.
under your stance, under your motion,
Right.
how are you trying why is it that you're trying to do this motion, but as instead of relying on the current welfare system, you know, like there are plenty of welfare systems that help the disadvantaged. Why is it important in this motion since we already have that system?
Okay.
Order.
Okay. In that particular system, because we feel it is a bit less reliable, to be honest. Okay. So now moving on to my second point, by us paying additional benefits means that the student, the parent and teachers association would eventually want to seek money for the students by itself. It's like we can't really rely on the welfare. Imagine like in schools, in Malaysian schools, you have so many schools, so many students would eventually apply for a particular system, but only the real one gets. So what's happening in our world today? We would eventually encourage schools to get funded. We would eventually ask schools, punya parents and teachers association to seek funds from NGOs, and to go through those process would eventually go through a very thorough process. Those NGOs and government organization would eventually want to monitor those schools. So when they monitor, when they see the results, at the end of the day, it would eventually be easy for them to give the amount of money to that school. And when they see results, they would eventually want to give more money to that particular school. So with this, I've actually talked about two ideas, which is it would be like a source of encouragement for school to get funded in a very good process, since the source are very limited. There's so many schools and stuff like that. So the school actually have to go through extra job. So this would eventually encourage the school to go further, to put the extra work by themselves. So in this, I've actually talked about two main points. Number one, it would eventually reduce the families burden of the children, whereby the children would eventually get money and stuff like that. They would eventually get funded by themselves, and they have to also work harder. And also my second point is about the encouragement of school to get funded. With that, I would like to rest my case.
Thank you, the Prime Minister. Just for this, some of you guys are still new. So when it comes to giving a POI, you would just turn on your voice and then say POI. So or maybe you want to do like video with the voice and also that in the chat to make sure that the person be able to read also can. But you just say like POI, and then stay quiet until he or she or they, because you guys have to understand it's an international competition. So pronouns is sometimes is a very sensitive issue. So so for instance, you just want to POI, which is point of information. You want to ask someone about a question, you say POI, and then and then once the person say yes, accept or whatever, and then you give your POI. Try to make it as brief as possible. Is possible within 10 seconds, and don't have that kind of conversation. So for instance, like if, for instance, Amir came into this debate and then asking a question and then Aru doesn't understand, move on. Like if you don't understand, if you cannot be able to understand what he says, just move on. All right, just as a general reminder. All right, thank you, Prime Minister. Now I would like to call upon the leader of opposition to open the case on the opposition side. Here.
Here, here.
Kiran, we cannot hear you. Is it just me?
I cannot hear, so.
I also cannot hear.
Yeah. Sure.
Is now okay?
Yeah.
Ah, yes.
Yes, now we can hear you.
Damn it. I give a one-liner now, I forgot.
Dude, it's your fucking fault, you bitch. You should have
I'm
like.
sorry. All right,
You
it's
should.
okay. It's okay.
Okay. Like before you guys for the real competition, you guys go ask the adjudicators. Test your mic first, whether they can hear
Okay,
you or
okay.
not. Stuff like that. All right.
Nothing. Oh my. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the debate. I, as the leader of the opposition, shall repent on the idea of adding benefits to families on welfare whose children perform well in school. First and foremost, I would like to get one thing clear. I do agree to one word that Siva said, that is, benefit should be on monetary terms. That's the only thing I agree with. And I wish to prove that most of the definition and the ideas given by the Prime Minister is utterly on the grounds of being allowing additional problems to occur in the financial issues that we already have in the country. If I can do that, I can at least take opening gov out of the debate. First and foremost, I shall define benefits as, yes, monetary. But the problem with Siva's definition is, he mentioned how many A's they have, right? Top three students as how many A's they have. What if the students are not from, families that are not doing well? Let's say a rich kid makes it to the top three. Will benefit go to them also? Which brings me directly to the funding by parent and teacher association, which he said reduces the burden. I feel that the parents and teacher associations already have enough funding given by government, as in welfare, just like the POI by Army states, which means the status quo that states that benefit is essential to help students that are struggling financially and they need to perform well in school because their families are underprivileged is literally not feasible, because that's why we have welfare in the first place. And for the government to say that the welfare is less reliable is very contradictory, and they are shooting themselves in the foot. So first things first, I would like to state the burden of proof that benefits bring more harm than good. Okay, let's put that out of the way. When it comes to welfare, we already have enough welfare funds, such as we have BPN, we have Baitul Mal, we have that. We have too much of welfare, which, for your information, is already not going to the right hands in the first place. The government already cannot guarantee that 100% of the welfare is going to the right people. Yes, that is flawed, but that is no reason for us to add benefits. We can simply correct the system by doing check and balance. With this, I mean, okay, the first issue is welfare money doesn't reach poor people fully. All right, we have people, middlemen, from politics, whatever, they come, take the money, and people who actually need the welfare, they don't get it fully, which causes them to need more welfare related help, which is why the government today is addressing it as we need to have benefits. By doing this, they are deliberately ignoring the problem here, which is, where does the welfare money go? This is the problem that we wish to solve. And with that, we have to note that based on the budget of the government, welfare money is assigned to many schools around the nation, all right, for educational causes. It is there, but the accounts also show that the welfare money isn't being used properly. Let's go back to what the government said about giving privileges of monetary causes and internet to children. Okay, you already mentioned benefit is monetary, right? In that case, the money will go to the students directly, which means we have to be relevantly secure about the student's mental state. The student is, an underage student because it's SPM, right? Under 18, which means despite them doing well in school, apparently, they are going to lean towards luxuries when they get the money, which means they won't use the so-called what's the word, so-called additional benefit money for their good. Instead, they will shy away from what's good and start doing all the things that a student shouldn't do. Let's say wasting money on luxuries and so on. So that directly cancels out the need for benefits in the first place, when all we have to do is create check and balance in the current welfare system. By check and balance, all we need to do is trace back the money that we give, where does it go, make the money transaction secure enough that poor families who need welfare get the welfare money 100%. My deputy leader of opposition will talk about our mechanism further. And yes, with my arguments just now, we can be clear that additional benefits is not needed, whereby we have taken the grasp of opening government out of the debate. We have already given stats and challenged the definition. With this, I am very proud to oppose. Thank you.
Here. Thank you, the leader of opposition. Now, I would like to call upon the Deputy Prime Minister to support the case on the government side. Here.
Here.
Hello. Before I start, can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Hello, guys.
Yeah, can hear.
Okay. Um, start now. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So today's motion is very close to my heart. The House will pay additional benefit to families on welfare whose children perform well in school. First of all, I would like to strengthen the point that is made by my Prime Minister. The Prime Minister told that we want to fund the B40 in monetary and food, things like that. Okay, so with that being said, I think the leader of opposition missed the point here. We're not saying the welfare system currently has issues or things like that. We are saying that we want to give additional benefit. Okay, first of all, let us understand what is the additional benefit here. The additional benefit is in terms of monetary and food. Okay, things like that. Okay, every person need a reward to do something. Every person in this room need a reward to do something. So with that being said, if a student performs well in in a in a school, if he's a B40, we should incentivize him to be better. That's the thing. Okay. And one more thing, the leader of opposition keep on talking about creating check and balance. Okay. First of all, we want to say that this welfare is under the school itself. You might say that the check and balance is locally sourced. It's not under government or under anything. We are saying that the school itself plays a role in creating and making sure that the money goes to the one who needs. Welfare like Baitul Mal and Zakat may have switched hands and things, but welfare from school is locally sourced. So everybody could see where's the money going. And plus, we have PIBG meeting almost every year. So they will literally show where's the money going. Okay. So this brings to my next point. Students today are the leader of future. So we have school itself need to play an active role in investing in our future leader. So this is one of the way they could invest on our future leader right now. Okay, as you can see, this will become like a CSR, a community source, community project for the school in investing into the future generation. Why is this a good thing? I feel like every community need to play an active role in rewarding students, in making them feel like they should work harder to achieve something. So, if just in case we give them an additional benefit of monetary, for instance, it helps them. It helps them to feel appreciated, even though it's small compared to a huge sum that was given by government, 100 ringgit a year. Even though it's 50 ringgit, the student itself will feel rewarded and appreciated. Okay, so before I continue, I would like to ask, is there any POIs?
I have one. May I
Okay,
proceed?
go ahead.
Okay. Oh man. All right.
Yeah, you may proceed.
Okay. You're making this a race of, children from poor families need to make it to at least the top 3 to at least deserve the welfare that you're giving, right? The benefits that you're giving. How about students that are not able to make it in school in the first place? Students that have to help their family outside of school. They might not make it
Order.
top 3. How about them?
Okay, so the POIs is fun. Okay, let me just like break it down for you. Okay, if the student doesn't make it, they have other welfare. This is just an additional welfare. You need to understand the word additional. That basically it's basically it's an additional welfare in in from other welfare. If other welfares work, it's good for them. If other welfare doesn't work, they have this additional welfare to work for. So this incentivizes the B40 students to focus even harder. Okay, you might you just said just now, how about the M40 student and things like that? They are privileged to have extra tuition, extra books. So the B40 students are right now at the bottom of the barrel who can't even study properly. So if they work hard, they know that they are getting something and getting there like that. Basically, they will have reward. And one more thing, I have friends who are like poor, and what they do is basically they can't afford anything. So if this kind of initiative works, it will help them tremendously. So with that being said, I would like to rest my case. Here. So guys,
Yeah. Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. Now I would like to call upon the Deputy Leader of Opposition to support the case on the opposition side. Here.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, so before I move on to my main points, I'd like to rebut a few things spoken by the member of government just now. The main rebuttal would be how he said about how about this logical flow where under their motion they're trying to incentivize B40 students to work even harder because privileged students have enough resources to work with. Then what's the use of the mechanism in the first place? If under their side they're saying that privileged students have enough resources to work with, doesn't that mean that they have more resources, they are more likely and the odds are higher for them to get first, second, and third rankings? Then that leaves the B40 students in an already losing race. They're already losing from the start. If you're already saying that the M40 and the T20 students already have these resources under their mechanism, so it's a losing race. So another thing I like to point out is how they're saying that, oh, okay, we have these welfare systems in Chad, But okay, if they don't get, if we're just they're under the side of government, they just want to implement more benefits to help the disadvantaged. So as my leader of opposition has said before, what's the point of this motion when we already have welfare systems in check to already help the disadvantaged in the first place? What's the point of having additional benefits when these things these welfare systems in the form of, for example, BPN and laptops, like what Syed Saddiq is doing in his own state, and institutional organizations such as MARA helping the disadvantaged. So I'm trying to point out that by having these additional benefits, you are causing a disproportion of wealth instead of having social mobility like what Thai government is trying to do. So that would be my point. So moving on to my point, the disproportion. So the point of having welfare in the first place is for us to equalize the spread of wealth by having the disadvantaged receive more benefits than the M40 and the T20s. We already have that. It's settled. What underside government is trying to do is that they're trying to put in more benefits and on what is already existing. Like I said, welfare. This will cause an imbalance in the spread of wealth. So just imagine if these disadvantaged people already have these welfare systems in check, but they're getting more benefits under their side as compared to the M40s and the
Video,
T20s.
right?
But I'm not done yet.
Sure.
What this will do is cause a small, eventually snowball reaction in which there will be an imbalance and disproportion in wealth. Like I've said, as my first leader of opposition has said before, welfare is enough. There's enough welfare already. We have BPN, we have laptops, we have MARA. These people, all of these things are helping the local schools. And let's say let's say you're trying to create good future leaders. You're trying to say that, well, these welfare systems already incentivize them in the first place. So by having these additional benefits, it causes disadvantage. It causes by having more additional benefits for the disadvantage, it causes an imbalance of success, the spread of wealth in the
You are-
economy. Okay, what is it?
Okay, when you talk about BPN, basically, if you have BPN plus school, it would eventually be better. And when you talk about imbalance by itself, when you add additional to the underprivileged people, what's going to happen is that they would be in the same level of the privileged people by itself. I would like to readjust on that issue. Yeah.
Dude, what's the point of having BPN if that doesn't already make them as equal as that already? So what's the point of having these additional benefits? It's no point, as I've said before. It makes, rather than equalizing the disparities between the third class and the second and the first class, it makes them even worse. In the long run, let's say like we're doing this motion, it's in the long run. In the, let's say under their side, these people would be incentivized, these B40s. And let's say by miracle, they get first, second, thirds, even though privilege already have enough resources, and they'd be more likely to get those top rankings. Let's say, and they receive these additional benefits. What would happen is push the M40s and the T20s down. In the long run, there'll be a disproportion of wealth. As my first speaker has said, rather than us implementing more additional benefits, we should fix the system that's already in place. Wait, how long do I have left? Okay, so I'm done. Yeah, that's it.
No, you're not done yet. You can go on. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Then can I have a POI?
Yes, what is it?
You do realize that this motion is about families on welfare, correct? That we're not talking
Yeah.
about the people who are not on welfare. So how does
Yeah.
this okay, please go on. Hello?
You were saying again?
Like,
there
I'm
was a line.
Oh, sorry. I am saying that you do realize that this motion is about families on welfare, correct? And it's not about families who are not on welfare. and they do not need the money. And this idea that there would somehow be an imbalance in funds is like frankly ridiculous. So can you please respond to that?
All right. So the people who receive welfare are the B40s. That's a known fact. It's the B40s who receive this. So by 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 giving them more additional benefits under B40s in the long run, in the long run, there'll be a disproportion. I'm not, but logically speaking, people who are under welfare are in the B40s. You don't see the M40s or the D20s under receiving welfare. That's the point of giving welfare, is to give it to the disadvantaged, which are the B40s. All right. So as my leader of opposition has said before, rather than implementing and giving additional benefits, you should correct the system because there are enough benefits already. We should recognize the problems we face in our current systems. For example, the circumventing of funds that allow the T20 and the M40 students to receive these funds instead of disadvantage. That is what our concern should be, instead of giving more additional benefits. And in the long run, as I said, having a disproportion. So I end my speech. Thank you.
Thank you, the Deputy Leader of Opposition. Now I would like to call upon the Member of Government to extend the case on the government side. Here, here.
Here, here.
Okay. I'll start in 3, 2, 1. Currently, in Sabah and Sarawak, only about 40% of the Orang Asli children actually complete fully high school. And this is despite all the methods put on by the government to try and help the Orang Asli children. However, still only about 40% of them actually manage to complete high school. And from that percent who complete high school, even far less actually are able to go to positions of higher education. Now, we believe that this is a problem. Problems like these are things that must be corrected because we believe that the poor are at a significant disadvantage and therefore they deserve any leg up that they can get in order to be able to be better and in order to be able to be better students who will then they will be able to pull themselves up and help themselves after that. Now, firstly, before I move on, we on site closing government, what I would like to say is I will differ slightly from opening government's stand that they brought up because we believe that the stand is too limited. Now, firstly, the government said they would just award the top 3 students who are able to get good grades. We believe this is too little. Instead, we will not focus on the placings of the student, but just on how well they do in classes. So, for example, how many A's they get, what's their CGPA, things like that. There's no placing on top 3 or what or anything like that. Secondly, in terms of money, we will be giving them far more money than what the opening government said, at least 300 to 500 or even more. And not just the students from SPM, but all levels of both primary and secondary school students will be able to get this benefit because we believe that just giving them to just like SPM students or what is not enough, and those people are going to leave the school anyway. We believe that this policy will be better, longer lasting if you put it on both levels. Secondly, where will this money come from? Not from the Parents Teachers Association, who are already very underfunded, and it really leaves it to like how many people actually join the Parents Teachers Association, right? Instead, this money will come directly from the Ministry of Education. If you want to ask me how they're going to get their money, if they can get 80 million from JASA, they can get 11 billion to do some works for the Prime Minister's department, then they can definitely get money to fund this 100%.
Here, here.
And it will be in the budget. So this will be funded directly by the Ministry of Education. I will tell you how we will differ a bit from another way where we differ from opening government. Opening government did talk about some problems that are specific to the poor community, but they never really examined it, and they did not fully delve on why the current system that we had is very unfair and why it should be corrected. This is something that closing government will talk about, and we will also discuss further how this in turn, through having this system, we will be able to help the poorer community and bring them up. Now, some rebuttals, right? Firstly, opening opposition talked about right now. There's too many welfare programs, and that there's no checks and balances on where welfare goes. Under this current policy, right, the money will go directly to the families who are able to get A's. So there's no middleman in between. So I don't believe that that comes into play. And either way, any policy that you come up is open to any form of corruption, right? Just because something might be open to corruption is not a reason that you shouldn't have any form of policy or welfare funding in the first place, right? And at the very least, some of this money will go to those students who have welfare. So it will benefit those students regardless. So I don't believe that this point stands. Secondly, they also talk about how students will waste their money on things that they shouldn't. Number one, it doesn't matter what the student wants to spend on. The students are being rewarded for work that they put in. They should be able to spend that money any way that they see fit. It's not up to us to say what is right or wrong in the way that they spend their money. And anything that incentivizes them to do better in school and spend money, that's great. Thirdly, they also talk about how the welfare system will create an imbalance of welfare. Again, welfare is not like a zero sum game, right? Now, it's not like when you get this money, suddenly the people are suddenly going to become super rich or anything. That they're just going to be able to buy slightly better things than what they could before. Instead of margarine, maybe they can buy butter. Instead of printing a textbook, maybe they can buy a textbook. It's just simple things like that. Okay, now move on to my point. Right now, firstly, why do we want to set it at a school level? Because we believe that the schools are formative years. It's during your schooling time that you are exposed to the most amount of distractions, things like gangsterism, things like dropping out. All these are things that you experience uniquely in your schooling formative years when you're just newly developing. So that's why I want to have this policy in schools. Now, moving on to my point. Okay, so it's no secret that in poor families, right, it's very difficult for them to get good grades because grades are largely related to their social status. If you look at the graph, the people at the very top will be people who are rich, right? If you look at SAT scores, statistically, people with lower SAT scores are people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, right? This is because, right, these poorer families place less emphasis on education, and this mainly due to the lack of funds that these families have, right? So these children are encouraged to find work almost immediately, and due to the economic problems that they face, they have to just comply with what their parents want. So with this
POI.
policy in place, no, rejected. With this policy in place, we believe that parents will be even more willing to recognize education as an important part of school, and that they will be able to have to want to make their children do better in schools. Now, the current system, we believe, is quite unfair. Awarding just purely based on merit rights doesn't acknowledge that the poor overcome far more obstacles than rich people do, right? The poor have so many obstacles limiting them. Number one, very limited access to funds. Number two, very limited access to things like special educations and tuitions and classes, and also things like transportation and also like basic food, right? So there are many obstacles they have to overcome, and just awarding based on merit doesn't acknowledge the true things that these people went to because of how limited they are. Instead, we want to focus specifically on poor students who perform well, because we believe that because we believe that these students will be able to be seen as role models to other students, and also these students will make the other poorer students want to be able to do better to overcome obstacles. And since I'm out of time, I can't go on with the rest of my speech. With that being said, I'm very proud to propose.
Yo, that was fucking knifey. If I ever see one for God's sakes. That was such a knifing shit, man. Holy God, you know. Well, later I'll tell you guys what is knifing, but that one is a pure knife, like stabbing already, you know. But anyways, thank you, member of government. Now I would like to call upon the member of opposition to extend the case on the opposition side. Here.
I don't hear anything.
Yeah, me too.
She's grabbing a charger. Michi is sorry.
Hello.
I'm not Michi. I don't know if it's a dude or do that. Sorry, I just assume. Fuck my life. Sorry.
I think it's a she.
How you know? Ah, Michi is a girl. Okay. Sorry, Michi. I just say. Wah, Tajuddin, you horny bastard ah. Huh? JK, bullshit, my love.
Hey,
The
y'all
fact that you
can
said
hear
JK is
or not
even worse.
the thing just now?
Hmm?
Can y'all hear
I
the
heard,
alarm
I
just now?
heard, I heard the thing. I heard the thing.
Alah,
Hi
relax lah,
guys,
Tajuddin.
sorry I enter late.
Why you enter late?
I have
PJ,
quiz.
you tajam now?
Huh?
What tajam?
Tajam.
Tajam.
Ketuk
Tajam.
ketampi lah. Ketuk ketampi.
You know, because Martha doesn't know how to separate into rooms. You know, I just go like, what the fuck is she doing?
What? Seriously? Oh my god.
She
So
was
this
using
tajam.
fucking browser on fucking Zoom. I just go, what the fuck are you doing? That's why I download the goddamn app for God's sakes. You're a vice president. Now aku dah
I'm so
aku dah kena kau Martha. Itulah kau.
Maybe I didn't
Nah,
maybe
it's
my
okay.
fault.
I deserve it.
No lah, I didn't give Martha the clear clear apa? What is that in
Instruction.
English?
Instructions.
Arahan, yeah, instruction, yeah. Maybe
Alah,
I didn't give her clear instruction. I'm so sorry because this quiz is 20%, so I cannot miss it. So I'm so
yeah.
sorry, guys.
Faham lah. But still, I'm gonna blame Martha.
Wait, who's up next?
I'm not sure. It's up to
Michi kot.
yeah, Michi.
Hello?
Yeah,
Okay,
we hear you.
And hear me? Okay.
All right, you can start.
First of all, okay. Okay. So good evening to everyone. First of all, I'll be making like rebuttals against the member of government, and then I'll be giving my points, which is the additional welfare will affect the mental health of the B40 students, and then my opposition whip will wrap it up. Okay. So first of all, member of opposition made mention of how it won't be focused on just the top three, and it will be focused on other achievements. All except that it's not very clear on how he wants to implement this, because when I think about it, we shouldn't really be just awarding the students that only get A's, because there are other types of achievements, such as like maybe being like good at art or like good at sports. And then the second rebuttal that I want to make is how the member of government wanted to expand it to not only just SPM students, but for the primary and for the primary students also. Except at a primary school level, students don't exactly understand monetary value. They don't understand that, oh, by studying this, they'll get this. And not only that, it will just degrade the value of education at an early age. And then moving on, member of government also mentioned how it should be up to them to spend the money, except the additional welfare is supposed to elevate this B40 community and make their life better. So how does the welfare help them in the long run if they're going to spend it on something that's temporary, like games or comic books or something like that? Okay, so moving on to my first point, which is how the which is how the additional welfare will affect the mental health of B40 students. Now, let's think about it. The B40 people, there's a reason why the phrase "the rich gets richer and the poor gets poorer." It's because that it is the case of the mentality of the parents themselves. So in the B40, there is a pool of parents who don't think too much about the education of their students. So, but let's just say those parents, they realize, oh, if my kids get money from by getting good grades, then I should get my kids to do well in school. Now, this type of parents, they don't encourage. Instead, they pressure those kids to do well in school. Now, but this will simply deter the mental health of B40 students. Instead of getting them to be better, it'll just do the opposite. And then it'll just do the opposite. And when and then which simply nullifies the point of giving additional welfare to the B40 people, because as I've said before, we are giving the government wants to give this money so that it will motivate the students to do better. But then if it turns out that this kind of incentive does the opposite, it simply punishes the B40 students, then it doesn't fulfill the purpose of the additional welfare. And with that, I rest my case.
All right, thank you, member of government. Now I would like to call upon the opposition whip to conclude the case. Opposition whip, government whip to conclude the case on the government side. Here.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I'm just going to time myself, yeah? Okay, 3, 2, 1, start. When education is not liberating, the dream of the oppressed is to become the oppressor. We on the government side believe that the current system that supports just scholarships on a university level is unfair because it doesn't acknowledge the struggles of the poorer children to overcome the barriers that the rich take for granted in primary levels. We have differentiated ourselves from the government in 3 different parts, in which we talk about how we're going to change the mechanism, that we don't believe that only the top 3 students should benefit, where the money comes from, where it should come from the government, because as Povin has said, if they can somehow come up for billions for things that do not matter, they can definitely invest some into education, right? And where this help would go, we are expanding the territories to include also primary students, as we think that this is the part of our education that is the most fundamental to us as students. So opening opposition government points are points that we often hear from the privileged. We hear similar rhetorics from the Tories in Britain that the welfare queens are taking money from people who are not deserving and are misusing it. That the working class are the leeches taking money from the hard-working rich, right? It's like they're forgetting that we're talking about children and not talking about the interests of the rich people. You're fighting on the wrong side here, ladies and gentlemen. So first, they talk about the mismanagement of welfare, right? He claims that, our Prime Minister claims that there are politics and bureaucracy, which is a deeply semantic argument in the first place, and then that there needs to be more check and balances. But where does this check and balances come from? There was no explanation at all from the government side. They just make one-liners and they don't explain what they mean by that, right? They claim there is mismanagement, but then it is up to you to bring up the burden of proof. What politics caused this mismanagement of welfare? Who is misusing the money, right? And Povin has talked about how they have taken this to the absolute extreme, And I think it's extremely bad faith argumentation that if not all the money that we collected is meant to go to the needy makes it to the needy, then we shouldn't help them at all, right? That it is not worth helping them in the first place. Then they claim that the children have this seduction towards money and they will become corrupted. I would like to add on towards Purvis rebuttal and in the fact that they talk about like these kids are given millions and millions of ringgit so they can buy iPads or something like that. Look, it's the same argument that conservatives use against the poor, that if we give them money, they will philander it away on stuff that they do not read, right? But statistics have shown that when people are given money to survive, they use it in the things that best help them to survive, right? And it doesn't take that much of a leap in logic. Think of it logically. If you use all of your money to buy drugs, then you have less money to spend on necessities, and this applies to students as well. Now, the metric that we're talking about are children who perform well in schools, right? How do you expect them to keep getting this fat ass 4.0 GPA stacks if they can't even buy the material it takes to like learn the material in the first place? Now, and then the deputy comes in and talks about this snowball reaction of the wealthy getting even more money, that the B40s that do well will get a disproportionate amount of money, and then the rest of the B40s aren't getting the fat stacks, right? So I would like to ask you a question, right? That if we somehow give money to the B40, they will rise out of poverty, which is what we want to strive for. Please do not threaten me with a good time, boys. So their main stand here is that the benefits that we already have in status quo is adequate, and it just needs a little bit of mismanagement, which they did not talk about how this mismanagement will go through. But then I would clarify that this fact isn't even true, right? We have been independent for 50 years, and in those 50 years, currently today at 2020, Malaysia has the biggest wealth gap since our conception. Clearly, the status quo, which we've been using for the last 50 years, is not fixing anything. If not, it is making it worse. And rather than saying that we should not try at all, I think it is time that we give this policy a try. At least then we can see some kind of inception from a better education sense, right? So the summary of the opening half is that no matter what, will be the fact that they have no matter because they aren't arguing for their case. They are arguing against us. There is nothing that suggests that their points are in the interest of helping the main stakeholder in this debate, which are the children, right? And then and imagine my utter confusion when the trend continues in closing, right? I cannot believe my ears when I heard support for children not being smart with money when Povin has already come up and told you like, yeah, it's children aren't going to be the smartest with money, but as Povin has said, it is a reward, right? They can spend it on whatever they like. It's like you people never have been children before. It's like you have never been like bribed by getting an A if you could get a new phone, for example. That's how I started getting good marks. You think I got good marks because I thought that what my parents said were true? No, it's because my parents bribed me. And I think that even though the
Hear,
spirit,
hear.
even if the spirit of this is not exactly the good girl, good boy, good study kind of mentality, right? Even if bribery is not like the most purest of intentions, it gets the work done, right? And it seems that closing is incredibly derivative on whatever that the opening is saying, that they have repeated this point again, that somehow if we give the B40 more money, they will rise out of poverty. Again, don't threaten me with a good time. I like people getting out of poverty. I thought that was the point of this debate, right? And then it shows that the side of opposition has this complete lack in empathy, that the acknowledgement of the suffering these students go through is like completely absent from their minds, right? That these students work harder to overcome these barriers. Povin has talked to you about the barriers of education and how they're way too high in terms of transport. Like rich kids can take cars, but poor kids have to take the bus or they have to walk to school. Food. The opposition has already supported this, that you could get better. The opening has talked about this, where they talk about getting better food, which should give them better growth and better mental growth, right? And the books where we used to study. And also there's this underlying issue that communities who live in poorer neighborhoods, right, often have poorer facilities, and they are often in danger of much more crime, because the places where the poor live also tend to be the places where crime usually happens. There's less security and they're more likely to get injured. They live in far more dangerous neighborhoods. Also, there is also the fact that they often come from poorer home lives. So not only that they have to study, get good grades, they also have to come home, help their mom, maybe help out in a restaurant or something, take care of their siblings, and then there's also do their homework and get good grades as well. And so despite all of this, they succeed, right? So I would like to just give a wrap up of this debate. So now I would like to talk about the best case, worst case scenario. But in this case, it's not exactly fair because in the opposition, their best case is basically doing nothing and letting the status quo continue when it has not worked. And the worst case is the same because they still don't have a mechanism to help, right? In our best case, we at least have a solution, right? We provide these kids a better avenue at a younger age to develop interest so they can get a head start that they didn't have. Worst case, I guess the B40, some of the B40 can rise out being poor, which is, I guess, kind of great also. So with that, I proudly propose.
Thank you, the government whip. Now I would like to call upon the opposition whip to conclude the entire debate. Here.
I'm going to go to the toilet for a while. Sorry.
Okay.
Oh, you want to go to the toilet? We just wait for a while. Quickly Cibai. Sekali je aku curse kat orang. Sekali apa
This is the only power you have now, Sharul. Later in the year
Can
you can curse
can I go to toilet though?
Yeah, anyone who wants to go to the toilet, go now.
It's a safe.
I need to wash off my mask.
It's a
Thank
safe
you,
space
Dato'
where
Sri.
you can curse
I berlalu.
I could feel the communism in Lam.
I am a pure communist. Every single
I could
debate.
feel the intensity of the communists. I feel like I want to play the fucking USSR
Yes.
fucking national anthem.
My goal in debate is to radicalize more people.
Oh my god! Suddenly you radicalize people, then suddenly meet a KKK group. What the fuck?
Wait, that is on the other side of the spectrum. My side
Yeah.
is like Mao or some shit.
That's KK is a racist, right? It's not communist.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but still radicals.
I'm lost.
Still radicals, right?
Yeah, but still, if you want a communist, it's USSR, not KK, right?
Yeah.
KK is Kota Kinabalu. I mean KKK. Shit.
KKK.
My
Chimpeng.
God, it's been so long.
What are you implying, that touch? What are you implying? I'm orang KK, okay? I take offense to this.
Hey, dude, I cannot go KKK, bro.
What the fuck? Nobody wants to go to a fucking KKK, for God's sakes. So we're just waiting for Kiran now.
Okay.
Yo, I'm
Cepat
gonna
je.
ask again. Can you guys hear the ring just now? I know it's
Yeah,
annoying.
somewhat.
Oh, right. I
No,
tried my
definitely no.
Okay. Maaf.
Right. For Mata, you just sing lah. Just go like
Okay lah,
Single
later lah I
fucking-
do.
Yeah, and then like you're gonna hurt everybody's fucking ears. Is Kiran in? Alah, this Chibai also. What the fuck is he doing? Masturbating also.
Why is your go-to masturbating every time? Is
No,
that
it's
like
a guy.
projection?
No, you
No,
don't want
no,
to know
it's
what you don't want to know what goes down in Polytechnic Unkoma.
Oh, we are fucking misogynistic bitches, man. Everything for God's sake.
But the kinkier sex counts for the most misogynist places.
Yeah, so that's true. That's true.
Is that something to be proud of?
Oh, wait. Kiran is here, so might as well we first conclude the
Is
debate
that
first.
something to be proud of?
Carol holds on to anything that he can.
Hey, Whip is not here.
Yeah, her connection is bad.
Oh no.
She's been trying to connect dari tadi.
No, she cannot also debate.
Apa? Which one?
To Alisha.
Maybe someone else can go.
PJ, you want to go?
How do I defend in this? If I was the Whip, it's quite hard though. It's quite hard.
You
Where
pick the
is-
motion.
Yeah.
No, because like I'm the opposition Whip. I have to follow the member. So it's like she is in Pago right now. It's quite hard if I want to.
What does that have to do with?
Yeah, exactly.
Is the connection bad in Pago?
I don't know. But it's like it's gonna be a big problem because tomorrow's the competition. Is like, so if you cannot get the internet connection, Okay lah. Then I'll try to be an opposition whip lah. You guys okay with that? Well, how can I? You know, like Lam went full on fucking communism, like bullshit.
Wait, Johari is not debating.
No, because we wanted to debate according to your teams. So that, you know, yeah. So it's
Fortunately, I'm not debating tonight.
Yeah.
Sorry,
After this
Johari.
Johari.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Sorry.
Because I think your teammate wasn't here, right? If I recall
Yeah,
correctly.
PJ wasn't here.
Yeah,
I'm
so we
already right now.
yeah. So we prioritize those who, like, you know, with a complete team
wait,
lah, so
wait,
that they
sure.
can get.
Alex, is Alisa coming?
I'm not sure because her connection from just now keep disconnecting and her line is really not stable at the moment.
Alright. I think we can give this to Sharul.
Yeah.
Sharul, the
Okay.
master, whatever.
Okay lah. So I'll just Do you guys want me to be the whip, or should I just conclude the debate as it is? Because it's like
I
not
think
much of a
just
difference.
conclude lah. For
You
me,
want
I
to
just
conclude the debate, ah? Okay.
But depends what everyone else wants.
Can't hear you, Tajuddin.
We just want to see because we're kind of new. Yeah, we're kind of new. We want to see how to debate.
I mean, like
just conclude, I think.
Lam and Puvin
It's
is like.
better for you to debate so that
Can't hear you.
He's being sucked into the metasphere.
He's saying that it's better if you debate because so that we can see how the overall BP format goes.
Oh, okay. All right.
Wait.
Okay.
For those of you who do AP, just know that BP got no reply speech. That's one of the difference.
Not that.
Yeah. So okay lah. So since since you guys want me to be the last speaker opposition whip, so I'll try my best lah. Since I suck at it, even though I probably suck at it. Wait, just give me a sec. Okay. So can you guys hear me? All right. So I'll start in debate in 3, 2, 1. So the question for this entire debate is actually when it comes to first is the report, how do we be able to ensure that the quality of these students when they get out of school, you know, to be able to make sure that they have first in terms of this welfare can be able to help them in terms of their studies. Secondly, to be able to ensure that these students being able to move out from their current predicament, which is under the, you know, the poverty line. So and then the thirdly is in terms of how does in terms of this welfare should be, you know, the idea of this welfare in the first place, right? So the question becomes, firstly, is which one is better in terms of the students? We say that under our side is actually in terms of the problems of when it comes to the mental health. So understand that each of these students are in terms of pressurized to be able to perform each of these situations, each of their, you know, being able to perform in terms of their schools, to be able to perform in terms of, let's just say in the best case scenario that they have to be able to maintain all of their grades, right? So all of their burden comes towards them to be able to, for instance, to uplift their families from B40 to M40. Thus, in that situation, you would have actually a more pressure for these students to be performed, because then there's the state of their family, the state of their entire economics of their family depends on this specific individual to be able to, you know, somehow magically to be able to, for instance, to be able to get their family out of poverty, rather than to be able, for instance, to be able first to create a better individual when it comes to, you know, when it comes to talking to people, or because joining core curriculums in the first place, rather than just focusing in terms of study. We understand that in terms of the studying, it's also important to be able to have, for instance, to be able to move on with your diplomas or your degrees. But nonetheless, if you create in terms of a very restrictive perspective of a student focusing upon books, you will not create a very holistic individual that can be able to contribute when they leave these institutions, these school institutions, since they are so focused upon in terms of their own education, lifting in terms of their families out of poverty, rather than focusing in terms of their own development, right? So this is where we understand our side is actually better, because we understand that there are the problems that does exist, and we do not want these problems to become more. And we want to be able to ensure that the students being able in the holistically to be able to, uplift them as an individual, not just as a, quote unquote students that can get A solid and so on and so forth, right? Secondly, in terms of the, fuck lah. Mechanism, funds. In terms of the question of which one is better in terms of uplift, in terms of which one is better, whether the status quo or within the entire, in terms of the idea of additional welfare, right? We think that a welfare in itself, it should be given to in terms of everyone, regardless of the situations, regardless of their, in terms of their own, suddenly that they have this miraculous ability, to be able to contribute, right? Then we will be pretty much is not what welfare is. Welfare is in terms of should be given to individuals who needs it, regardless of once you meet this criteria. Suddenly, for you to be able to somehow, like an individual, you have suddenly this extra thing that suddenly like, the government gives you that extra benefit. In our perspective, that's not a welfare anymore, because that's not giving everyone an same equal treatment of when you somehow follow in terms of these criteria. For instance, if you have some under MARA, you need to under B40, then you will get this, regardless of the situation, you will get this welfare, right? So under our side, we be able to at least ensure that everyone is treated equally within this, regardless of this welfare. Why this is important, right? Because the understanding that the welfare, in terms of how this welfare should be, is to be able to help everyone as equal as possible, and it's in terms of not putting these people left behind. Because understand, when additional welfare is being put forth, there are some people that, regardless of the situation, is going to be left in the dust, right? So because you're not giving this equal opportunity towards every single individual, every single families. So that's the kind of welfare beats the kind of idea of a welfare, because you're not giving this opportunity, because they have to apparently meet this high, criteria of being able to be performed the most in the most extravagant manner, right? So in terms of our perspective, welfare should be given regardless of whether if you're under the B40, you should get the welfare. It doesn't matter whether you are smart or whether you are you're not smart. Regardless, you need this welfare to be able for you to survive, right? That's in terms of our case. So this is how that we are actually, in terms of exclusive, in terms of the closing side is more exclusive when it comes to this debate. We understand that there is, in terms of an issue when it comes to the students being able to put up in terms of that performance, being able to ensure in terms of maintaining that performance within schools. How can they ensure that these students, since every single burden, of being social economical uplift is put in terms of their own self-burden. So we understand when that problem exists, the likelihood for them to be able to survive and get the welfare in the first place is unlikely, since that burden is put upon them. And for these families to be able to see these students or see these children as no more than as an instrument for them to be able to gain more welfare. What kind of families would you want to be able to see? Is they see you as nothing but numbers to be able to get more money. We think that students in itself should be able to learn in terms of the most holistic manner in the first place, right? So under our side, the worst case scenario that happens, that everything maintains within the status quo, nothing be able to somehow no movement be able to exist, but at least that these students will not be able to put forth that burden within themselves. Well, under their case, the best case scenario is that somehow these individuals to be able to uplift themselves from say poverty, but regardless, the likelihood for them to be able to maintain such economical status, for instance, the best case scenario, they can go from B40 to M40, is actually unlikely, since they are being able to be pushed, from their parents to be able to perform in the first place. With that, I rest my case. So tiring.
You should be ashamed for saying you're rusty.
Yeah, you should.
Hang your head.
That was
in shame,
amazing, man.
bastard.